Welcome to this video lecture, one of the most fundamental aspects of human behavior. In this video, we will cover learning and values of organizational behavior. In the professional world, understanding how we acquire new behavior and what internal standards guide our decision is crucial for effective management and personal growth. Today, we will dissect the mechanism of how people change through experience and how their core beliefs shape the workplace environment. Before we dive into the core content, let's establish our roadmap for this session. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to define learning from a psychological and behavioral perspective, identify the key factors that influence the strength and permanence of learned responses, distinguish between the four principal elements of the learning process, compare and contrast the theories of classical and operant conditioning, explain the formation of values and differentiate between terminal and instrumental values. And after, analyze contemporary ethical issues and the role of organizational justice in the modern workplace. What exactly do we mean when we say someone has learned something? Is it merely the memorization of facts or is it something deeper? In an academic sense, learning is a continuous process that occurs all the time, often without us even realizing it. It is defined as a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience. Think about it. If your behavior remains exactly the same after a specific event, can we truly say you have learned? Probably not. We look for change in behavior as the primary indicator that learning has taken place. This change must be relatively permanent, it meaning that a temporary shift due to fatigue or one-time mood swing does not count as a true learning. It is the result of prior experience, whether that experience was intentional or accidental. To ground our understanding, let's look at two definitions. According to E.R. Dilgard, he defines learning as a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of prior experience. This emphasizes the longevity of the change. Adding another layer, according to W. McGahey, suggested that learning has occurred if an individual react or respond in a manner different from how they formerly behaved. This highlights the before and after aspect of human experience. Whether you are learning a new software at work, it how to direct a difficult conversation with a colleague. The shift from your old way of acting to your new way of acting, that is the essence of learning process. Ask yourself this: can we ever truly see learning itself? The answer is no. Because learning is an internal process. We cannot look inside a person's brain and see a learning happen. Instead, we infer that learning has occurred by observing a change in outward behavior. If an employee was once late but is now constantly on time after a performance review, we can conclude that a learning process regarding punctuality has been taken place. Do marketers or managers ensure that a lesson sticks in consumers' mind? This brings us to the strength of learning. Why do we remember some brand name for a decade while forgetting others in a minute? The strength of learn response is heavily influenced by four critical factors, that is importance, reinforcement, repetition, and imagery. First, importance refers to the value a person places on the information. If you believe a piece of data is vital for your career advancements, you will learn it much more deeply than something you consider trivial. Second, reinforcement. Reinforcement is any stimulus that increases the likelihood of a response being repeated. It is the reward that tells the brain the behavior is worth keeping. We have repetition. This is the simple principle that the more times we are exposed to information or practice a behavior, the more likely we are to retain it. This is why advertisement hammer their message into consumers. They are building the strength of that mental connection through frequency. And the fourth is imagery. It involves the mental pictures created by words or brand names. High imagery words are easier to remember because they engage multiple parts of the brain. When a company uses a name that evokes a strong visual, the learning is often faster and more durable in the consumer's mind. What happens when we stop reinforcing a behavior? This leads us to extinction, or what we commonly call forgetting. In the world of business, extinction occurs when the reinforcement for a learned responses is withdrawal. For instance, if a brand stops all the advertising for a long period, the strength of the consumer's memory fade. The probability of the consumer being forgotten increases. In an organizational setting, if a manager stops praising a specific positive behavior, the employee might eventually stop performing that behavior because the reward or reinforcement has vanished in the mind of that employees. A fascinating aspect of learning is the rub-off effect, scientifically known as stimulus generalization. This occurs when a response to one stimulus is triggered by a similar but distinct stimulus. A classical example is brand loyalty. If a consumer learns that a specific brand of laundry detergent is effective, but they will likely assume that a new ultra version of that same brand, will also be so effective. They generalize their positive experience from that old product to the new one. Marketers use this to launch new family brands where the reputation of one product help to sell another new product. On the flip side, we have stimulus discrimination. This is the process of learning to respond differently to similar stimuli. A consumer might learn that while two brands of coffee look similar, one is premium and the other is budget friendly. This ability to tell the difference is crucial for making informed choices. Finally, we must consider the response environment. We often store more information than we can actually retrieve. Have you ever had a word on the tip of your tongue but couldn't say it? That is a retrieval failure. The stronger the original learning through repetition and importance, the easier it is to access that information when it is actually needed in a high pressure environment. To understand how learning happens in real time, we must look at its four principal elements: motive, cues, response, and reinforcement. First, let's talk about motive. Motives are the internal drive that arouses an individuals and increase their readiness to respond. Without a motive, there is no energy to learn. If you are not hungry, you have no motive to learn which restaurants are open late. In a business context, if an employee has no motive for promotion or self improvement, they are less likely to engage with training materials. Marketers try to align their brands with these motives so that when a need arises, their product is the first thing to consumers think. If motive provides the energy, cues provide the direction. A cue is a weak stimulus. It isn't strong enough to drive behavior on its own, but it tells a motivated person how to act. Imagine you are hungry. That is your motive. As you drive down to the street, you see a bright yellow M sign or smell the aroma of coffee. Those are cues. They don't make you hungry, but they direct your hunger towards a specific destination. In a store, product color and sell signs act cues that guides a shopper's decision-making process. The third element is the response. This is the physical or mental activity a consumer or employee performs in reaction to the motive and the cues. It is important to note that a response is not always visible. Someone might learn a new way of thinking about a problem, but you won't see it until they are faced with a specific challenge. Just because you cannot see a change immediately doesn't mean learning isn't happen. Over time, through experience, we learn which responses are appropriate for which situation. Finally, we have reinforcement. This is anything that follows a response and increases the chance of that response happening again. If you try a new brand of coffee and it tastes excellent, you are likely to buy it again. Reinforcement is the glue that hold the learning together. Without it, the behavior is likely to undergo extinction. In organization, reinforcement can be anything from a paycheck to a simple thank you from a supervisor. Now that we understand the elements, let's look at the how. There are two primary theories of learning, classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is a type of learning where an individual responds to a stimulus that would not normally produce such a response. This theory is famous because of Ivan Pavlov's experiment with dogs. Pavlov noticed that dogs salivated when they saw meat powder. This salivation was an unconditioned response. It was a biological reflex. Pavlov began ringing a bell just before feeding the dogs. Eventually, the dogs began to salivate as soon as they heard the bell. Even if the meat wasn't there yet, the meat powder was the unconditioned stimulus. The salivation was the unconditioned response, and the bell became the conditioned stimulus. The salivation in response to the bell become the conditioned response. In humans, this is often passive. We react to certain triggered because they have been paired with something else in our past. The pattern of operant conditioning follows a simple flow. Behavior. It means the individual's act, and the consequences. It means something happens as a result of that act. Future likelihood. It means based on the consequences, the behavior either increases or decreases. So, this is the foundation of most organizational reward system. If a salesperson meets their quota and receives a bonus, the likelihood of them working just as hard next month increases. Three major forms of operant learning. We must distinguish positive reinforcement, where you do something and get a reward. This makes you repeat that act. Example, eating a candy that tastes good. It leads to you buy it again. And the another is punishment. It is the opposite. You do something and result is unpleasant. Example, you eat something that looks like candy but turns it out to be soap. The foul taste ensures you will not touch it again. Is negative reinforcement the same as a punishment? Is a question where the answer is a definitive no. This is a common point of confusion where negative reinforcement is the removal of something unpleasant to encourage a behavior. Think of an annoying alarm in your car that beeps until you put on your seatbelt. The aversive stimulus is the beeping. When you put on the seat belt is the behavior and beeping stops because the unpleasant thing you went away. You are more likely to put your seat belt on quickly next time. In business, if a manager stops micromanaging an employee once they started meeting deadlines, that is negative reinforcement. Moving from how we learn to what we believe, let's discuss values. A value is an enduring belief that a specific mode of conduct or end state is personally and socially preferable to the alternatives. Value are the yardstick we use to guide our action and judge others. Once a value is internalized, it becomes a standard for developing attitudes and justifying our behavior. Values have a moral favor. They represent our judgment of what is right, what is good, or what is desirable. What makes value different from simple opinions? So, they provide standards for competence and morality. Value, they are fewer in number than attitudes. They transcend specific situations. A person who hold values honesty try to be honest at home, at work, or with friends. They are relatively permanent and very resistant to change, and value are central to the core of a person's identity. How do we decide what is important? Values are learned and acquired primarily through our experiences with institutions and people. Parents are usually the first and most substantial influence. By observing how parents react to everyday events, children learn what is acceptable and important. Later on, schools, religious organizations, and social groups reinforce or challenge these views. Our culture also play a massive role. The fundamental convictions of what is good or bad are often derived from the cultural environments we grew up in. Psychologist Gordon Allport and his associates categorized these values into six distinct types. Every individual has a mix of these, some of dominant and some are not in dominant. Theoretically, a focus on the discovery of truth through logic and systematic thinking. In economic condition, a focus on usefulness, practicality, and the accumulation of wealth. Aesthetic value, a focus on beauty, form, and artistic harmony. In a social context, a focus on people and the value of human relationship. In a political context, a focus on gaining power and influencing others. And finally, religious values, a focus on unity and understanding the universe as a whole. Individual possess a value hierarchies. If you have power to choose being the most powerful person in the room or the most helpful person in the room, which would you pick? The answer to that question reveals your value hierarchy. In a workplace, a person with high economic values will be motivated by bonuses, while someone with high theoretical values might be more motivated by a complex problem to solve. Milton Rockich took the study of values a step further by distinguishing between the means and the ends. He identified two types, instrumental values and terminal values. Terminal values represent the ultimate goals or the end states of existence. These are the things we want to achieve in our lifetime, such as happiness, freedom, self respect, or a world at peace. where the instrumental values. On the other hand, instrumental values are the means of achieving those goals. They are the modes of conduct that are acceptable to get us where we want to go. Example include being honest, ambitious, and courageous or responsible. This can lead to terminal values. Think about this. The terminal value is the destination and the instrumental value is the vehicle you use to get there. If your terminal value is family security, your instrumental value might be hardworking or ambitious to ensure you can provide for them. According to Rockage, he developed a survey to help people rank these values. This is the important for organizations because if an employee's instrumental values like honesty clash with the company's expected behaviors, it creates significant internal conflicts in the organization. To visualize this, let's look at some examples from Rocky's value survey in a comparison table. In terminal values, in a column of internal instrumental values. If you want in prosperous in life, you have to be ambitious. You want to accomplishment, you have to be capable. If you want to inner harmony, you have to build self-controlled. If you want to be social recognition, you have to be polite. And if you want freedom, you have to be honest. So these are the examples that we can see in a comparison table. In the specific context of a career, certain values take center stage. Work values are the critical because they dictate what an individual considers right or wrong on the job. Three of the most relevant work values are achievement, where a concern for a career advancement and skill development is an achievement, and the honesty, it providing accurate information and refusing to mislead others for personal gains, and fairness, an emphasis on impartiality and recognizing different viewpoints. When employees and organizations share similar values, the results are overwhelming positive, higher productivity, better morale, and lower turnover in the organization. Values guide behavior. Lack of ethical values can lead to serious organizational issues. First among these is white collar crime. This isn't just about big financial scandals. It also includes subtle behaviors like using work hour for personal business, inflating expense reports, or using company resources for personal mail. Regardless of the scale, these actions represents a breach of ethical standards in the organization. Root cause: weak ethical value system. A second major area is employee rights. In the digital age, managing the right to privacy versus companies' need for data is a balancing act. Does a company have to right monitor every keystrokes? What about drug testing? These are ethical dilemmas where the values of the organization must be weighted against the rights of the individual. Thirdly, we must address sexual harassment and romantic involvement. Harassment is any unwelcome sexual attention that creates a hostile environment. It costs companies dearly in terms of productivity and legal damages. Romantic involvements are more complex. While they may be consensual, they can create conflicts of interest or perceived preferential treatment. A supervisor dating a subordinate, for example, can disrupt the team's sense of fairness. Organizations need clear policies to ensure these situations don't turn into harassment or ethical failures. Organizational justice. This is divided into two parts. Disruptive justice is the outcome fair. Did the person who worked hardest get the biggest bonus. And another is procedural justice. It is the process for where the rules for the bonus clear and applied to everyone equally. Even if an employee doesn't like the outcome, they are more likely to accept if they believe that procedure used to get there was fair and based biased, not biased in skill and not in their favoritism. Work values like honesty and fairness are the bedrock of healthy organization. When these values are ignored, issues like white collar crime, harassment, and perceived injustice can destroy an organization's culture. I hope this video lecture has provided you clear insight and comprehensive knowledge about the topic. Thank you for careful listening.